Captain Sarah Chun had always been different from the other pilots at Nellis Air Force Base. While her colleagues spent their free time discussing the latest modifications to their F-16 Fighting Falcons or debating the merits of the new F-35 Lightning II, Sarah found herself drawn to something far more mysterious and controversial. The hangar at the far end of the base housed aircraft that most pilots only whispered about. These weren't the standard jets that filled the runways during training exercises. These were the experimental aircraft, the classified projects, the machines that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible in aviation technology. Among them sat a sleek, dark aircraft that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The YF-117X Ghosthawk wasn't officially supposed to exist. The military had spent billions developing stealth technology, creating aircraft that could slip through enemy radar undetected. But the Ghosthawk was something beyond even the most advanced stealth fighters. It represented a leap in technology that few people fully understood, and even fewer were qualified to pilot. Sarah had discovered the aircraft during her second year at Nellis. She had been working late one evening, reviewing flight plans for the next day's training mission, when she decided to take a walk around the base to clear her head. The night air was cool and crisp, a welcome relief from the intense Nevada heat that had dominated the day. As she walked past the restricted hangars, she noticed that one of the doors was slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of her. Sarah knew she shouldn't be there, but something compelled her to peer through the gap in the door. What she saw inside took her breath away. The aircraft was unlike anything she had ever seen before. It was smaller than most fighter jets, with smooth, flowing lines that seemed to defy conventional aerodynamic principles. The surface appeared to be made of some kind of advanced composite material that seemed to shift and change in the dim hangar lighting. From that night forward, Sarah became obsessed with learning everything she could about the mysterious aircraft. She spent hours in the base library, researching classified documents and technical manuals that required the highest level of security clearance. She discovered that the Ghosthawk was the result of a black-budget project that had been in development for nearly a decade. The aircraft incorporated technology that was years ahead of anything currently in service. Its stealth capabilities were so advanced that it could reportedly become virtually invisible to all forms of detection, including radar, infrared, and even visual observation under certain conditions. The propulsion system was equally revolutionary, utilizing a hybrid engine design that combined traditional jet propulsion with experimental electromagnetic field manipulation. But perhaps the most remarkable feature of the Ghosthawk was its neural interface system. Unlike conventional aircraft that relied entirely on manual controls and computer assistance, the Ghosthawk could form a direct connection with its pilot's nervous system. This allowed for response times and maneuverability that exceeded human physical limitations. The pilot and aircraft essentially became one entity, capable of performing maneuvers that would be impossible in any other aircraft. The technology was so advanced and potentially dangerous that only a select few pilots had ever been chosen to fly the Ghosthawk. The selection process was rigorous and secretive, involving psychological evaluations, neural compatibility testing, and extensive background investigations. Most pilots never even knew the aircraft existed, let alone had the opportunity to fly it. Sarah knew that her chances of being selected for the Ghosthawk program were slim. She was still relatively junior in rank, and she lacked the combat experience that was typically required for such elite assignments. But she was determined to prove herself worthy of the opportunity. She began pushing herself harder than ever before, excelling in every aspect of her training and seeking out additional challenges whenever possible. Her fellow pilots began to notice her increased dedication and intensity. During briefings, Sarah would ask detailed questions about advanced flight techniques and theoretical scenarios that went far beyond the scope of their current training. She volunteered for the most difficult and dangerous training missions, often taking risks that made her instructors nervous. The other pilots started to whisper among themselves about Sarah's behavior. Some thought she was trying too hard to impress their superiors. Others believed she was becoming reckless and dangerous. A few even suggested that the pressure of military life was getting to her and that she might be suffering from some kind of psychological breakdown. The whispers became more pronounced when Sarah began expressing interest in unconventional aircraft and experimental flight programs. During casual conversations in the pilot's lounge, she would bring up topics like advanced propulsion systems and theoretical aircraft designs. Her colleagues would exchange glances and smile condescendingly, treating her interests as the fantasies of someone who had read too many science fiction novels. Major Tom Rodriguez, a veteran pilot with over 15 years of experience, was particularly dismissive of Sarah's interests. He had flown combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan and considered himself an expert on military aviation. To him, Sarah was just another young pilot with unrealistic dreams and an overactive imagination. One evening, as several pilots sat around discussing their upcoming training exercises, Sarah made a comment about the potential benefits of neural interface technology in combat aircraft. The room fell silent for a moment before erupting in laughter. Neural interfaces? Rodriguez chuckled, shaking his head. Chun, you've been watching too many movies. We're pilots, not cyborgs. The day the Air Force starts plugging wires into our heads is the day I retire. The other pilots joined in the laughter, making jokes about Sarah's futuristic fantasies and suggesting that she should stick to flying real aircraft instead of dreaming about science fiction machines. Sarah felt her face burn with embarrassment, but she didn't back down from her position. Technology is advancing faster than most people realize, she said quietly. The aircraft we consider cutting-edge today will seem primitive compared to what's being developed in classified programs. Oh, come on, Sarah, said Lieutenant Mike Thompson, grinning widely. Are you trying to tell us that there are secret alien spacecraft hidden somewhere on this base? Maybe you should apply for a transfer to Area 51. The laughter grew louder, and Sarah realized that she had become the subject of ridicule among her peers. She excused herself from the conversation and left the lounge, feeling frustrated and isolated. But instead of discouraging her, the mockery only strengthened her resolve to prove that she was right about the potential of advanced aircraft technology. Over the following weeks, Sarah doubled down on her research and training. She spent every spare moment studying advanced aerodynamics, quantum physics, and neuroscience. She knew that if she ever got the chance to fly something like the Ghosthawk, she would need to understand not just how to operate the aircraft, but how to integrate with its systems on a fundamental level. Her dedication did not go unnoticed by everyone on the base. Colonel Patricia Hawkins, the base commander, had been quietly observing Sarah's progress for several months. Hawkins was one of the few people at Nellis who knew about the Ghosthawk program and had been involved in the selection of previous test pilots. Unlike the other pilots who dismissed Sarah's interests as fantasy, Hawkins recognized that Sarah possessed exactly the kind of forward-thinking mindset and technological curiosity that the Ghosthawk program required. The aircraft was not just another fighter jet that could be flown using conventional techniques. It required a pilot who could think beyond traditional limitations and embrace radical new approaches to aviation. Hawkins had been searching for the right candidate to join the Ghosthawk program for over a year. The previous test pilot had been forced to retire after suffering neurological complications from extended exposure to the aircraft's interface systems. The military needed someone young enough to adapt to the technology, but mature enough to handle the psychological pressures of the program. Sarah's combination of technical knowledge, determination, and unconventional thinking made her an ideal candidate. But Hawkins knew that she would need to be tested thoroughly before being granted access to such classified technology. The selection process would be unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced, and there was no guarantee that she would survive it intact. As Sarah continued her regular training duties, unaware of the scrutiny she was under, the wheels were already being set in motion for her to face the greatest challenge of her career. The mockery and dismissal she had endured from her fellow pilots would soon seem insignificant compared to what lay ahead. The Ghosthawk waited silently in its hangar, its advanced systems dormant but ready. Soon, it would awaken to test whether Sarah Chun had what it took to become something more than just another pilot. The aircraft would determine whether she could transcend the limitations of human capability and become truly extraordinary. But first, Sarah would have to prove that she was worthy of the opportunity. The selection process would push her to the very limits of her physical and mental endurance. She would be forced to confront her deepest fears and overcome challenges that would break most people. The other pilots might laugh at her dreams now, Soon they would understand that Sarah Chun was destined for something far beyond their comprehension. The Ghosthawk was calling, and only time would tell if she had the strength to answer. 3 weeks after the incident in the pilot's lounge, Sarah received an unexpected summons to report to Colonel Hawkins' office. The message arrived early Monday morning, delivered by a stern-faced sergeant who provided no additional information beyond the time and location of the meeting. Sarah spent the entire morning wondering what she had done wrong. Had someone reported her unauthorized research in a classified aircraft? Had her superiors decided that her unconventional interests made her unsuitable for continued service? The uncertainty gnawed at her as she made her way across the base to the administration building. Colonel Hawkins' office was located on the 3rd floor of a nondescript building that housed the base's command structure. Sarah had only been there once before, during her initial assignment to Nellis. The hallway leading to the office was lined with portraits of distinguished Air Force personnel and historical photographs documenting the base's role in aviation development. When Sarah knocked on the door, she was surprised to hear Colonel Hawkins invite her to enter immediately. The colonel was seated behind a large wooden desk covered with files and documents. Behind her, the wall was decorated with commendations and photographs from her distinguished career. "Captain Chun," Hawkins said, gesturing for Sarah to take a seat. "Thank you for coming. I understand you've been having some interesting conversations with your fellow pilots lately." Sarah felt her stomach drop. Someone had indeed reported her discussions about advanced aircraft technology. She prepared herself for a reprimand or worse. "Yes, ma'am," she replied carefully. "I hope I haven't said anything inappropriate." Hawkins smiled, an expression that seemed both reassuring and mysterious. "On the contrary, Captain, your interests have brought you to my attention for all the right reasons. Tell me, what do you know about Project Shadowbird?" Sarah blinked in surprise. She had never heard of Project Shadowbird, despite her extensive research into classified programs. "I'm not familiar with that project, ma'am." "I didn't expect you would be," Hawkins said, leaning back in her chair. "It's one of the most classified programs in the Air Force. So classified, in fact, that fewer than 50 people in the entire military are aware of its existence." The colonel stood and walked to a filing cabinet, retrieving a thick folder marked with multiple security warnings. She placed it on the desk between them, but did not open it. Project Shadowbird is the development program for the most advanced aircraft ever created by the United States military. It represents a quantum leap in aviation technology that makes our current stealth fighters look like crop dusters by comparison. Sarah's heart began to race. This was exactly the kind of program she had theorized must exist somewhere in the depths of the military-industrial complex. "What kind of aircraft are we talking about, ma'am?" "The YF-117X Ghosthawk," Hawkins said quietly. "A single-seat stealth fighter with capabilities that border on the impossible. It can achieve complete invisibility across all detection spectrums. Its maneuverability exceeds anything currently in service by orders of magnitude. And, most remarkably, it interfaces directly with the pilot's nervous system to achieve response times measured in microseconds rather than milliseconds." Sarah struggled to maintain her composure. The aircraft she had glimpsed in the hangar all those months ago was real, and it was everything she had imagined and more. "The reason I'm telling you this, Captain, is that we need a new test pilot. The position requires someone with exceptional flying skills, advanced technical knowledge, and the psychological flexibility to adapt to revolutionary technology. Based on your performance reviews and your demonstrated interest in advanced aviation concepts, you've been selected as a candidate for the program." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Everything she had worked for, everything she had dreamed about, was suddenly within reach. But she forced herself to remain professional. "What would the selection process involve, ma'am?" Hawkins opened the folder and pulled out a thick document. "The process consists of 3 phases. First, a comprehensive psychological evaluation to determine your mental fitness for the program. Second, a series of physical and neurological tests to assess your compatibility with the aircraft's interface systems. Third, assuming you pass the first 2 phases, actual flight testing with the Ghosthawk." She paused, her expression growing serious. "I need to be completely honest with you, Captain. This program is extremely dangerous. The technology involved pushes the boundaries of what the human mind and body can safely handle. Previous test pilots have experienced everything from temporary disorientation to permanent neurological damage. One pilot suffered a complete psychological breakdown and required months of intensive therapy to recover. Sarah absorbed this information, weighing the risks against the incredible opportunity being presented to her. What happened to the most recent test pilot? Commander Rebecca Walsh was our most successful pilot, Hawkins said. She flew the Ghosthawk for 18 months and achieved remarkable results. The data she provided advanced our understanding of human-machine interface technology by decades. But the neural integration eventually began affecting her cognitive functions. She started experiencing memory gaps, difficulty concentrating, and periodic episodes of confusion. The colonel closed the folder and looked directly at Sarah. Walsh was forced to retire from active duty. She's currently living in a specialized care facility where she receives ongoing treatment for her condition. The doctors believe she will eventually recover most of her cognitive function, but it will take years. The revelation was sobering, but it didn't diminish Sarah's desire to join the program. If anything, it reinforced her belief that the Ghosthawk represented the future of aviation and that someone needed to find a way to master its technology safely. Despite the risks, "Ma'am, I'm interested in participating in the selection process." Hawkins nodded, as if she had expected this response. "I thought you might be. The psychological evaluation begins tomorrow morning. You'll be working with Dr. Marcus Webb, who specializes in assessing candidates for high-stress, experimental programs." She handed Sarah a smaller folder containing instructions and preparatory materials. "This contains everything you need to know about the evaluation process. I should warn you that Dr. Webb's methods are unconventional and can be quite intense. He'll be probing the deepest recesses of your psyche to determine whether you have the mental fortitude to handle the Ghosthawk systems." Sarah took the folder, feeling the weight of the opportunity and responsibility it represented. "Thank you for this chance, ma'am. I won't disappoint you." "Captain," Hawkins said as Sarah prepared to leave, "one more thing. This conversation never happened. You're forbidden from discussing any aspect of Project Shadowbird with anyone who isn't directly involved in the program. The security implications are too severe to risk any breach of confidentiality." Over the next 24 hours, Sarah studied the materials in the folder intensively. The psychological evaluation would consist of multiple sessions designed to assess her emotional stability, stress tolerance, cognitive flexibility, and ability to maintain focus under extreme pressure. Dr. Webb's background was impressive and somewhat intimidating. He held advanced degrees in psychology, neuroscience, and cognitive science, and had worked with elite military units around the world. His research focused on the psychological effects of advanced technology on human operators, particularly in high-stress combat environments. The evaluation began at 0800 hours in a sterile white room located in the base's medical facility. Dr. Webb was a tall, thin man with penetrating blue eyes and an intense demeanor that made Sarah feel as though he could see directly into her thoughts. "Captain Chun," he said without preamble, "I'm going to be conducting a series of tests designed to determine your suitability for an extremely demanding assignment. Some of these tests may be uncomfortable or distressing. Do you understand and consent to participate?" "Yes, sir." The first phase of the evaluation involved standard psychological assessments, personality inventories, cognitive ability tests, and stress response measurements. Sarah answered hundreds of questions about her background, motivations, fears, and aspirations. She completed complex problem-solving exercises under time pressure and underwent tests designed to measure her reaction to unexpected stimuli. But the real challenge began during the second phase. Dr. Webb connected Sarah to a sophisticated monitoring system that tracked her brain activity, heart rate, blood pressure, and stress hormones. Then, he began presenting her with increasingly disturbing scenarios. "Imagine that you're piloting an advanced aircraft in combat," he said, his voice calm and measured. "Your systems indicate that the enemy has fired a missile at a school full of children. You have the capability to intercept the missile, but doing so would expose your position and likely result in your own death. What do you do?" Sarah considered the scenario carefully, aware that her every response was being monitored and analyzed. "I would intercept the missile. The lives of innocent civilians, especially children, take priority over my own safety. Dr. Webb made notes on his tablet without revealing whether her answer was correct or incorrect. Now imagine a different scenario. You're flying a reconnaissance mission over enemy territory when your aircraft begins experiencing system failures. You have enough power to either complete the mission and gather critical intelligence, or to return safely to base. The intelligence could save hundreds of lives, but attempting to complete the mission would put you at extreme risk of capture or death. The scenarios continued for hours, each one more complex and morally ambiguous than the last. Dr. Webb was clearly testing not just Sarah's decision-making abilities, but her willingness to sacrifice herself for the greater good and her capacity to function under overwhelming pressure. The most challenging part of the evaluation came during the final session. Dr. Webb placed a strange device on Sarah's head that looked like a cross between a medical scanner and a virtual reality headset. This device will simulate some of the sensory experiences you might encounter while interfacing with advanced aircraft systems, he explained. The simulation can be extremely disorienting and may trigger feelings of panic or claustrophobia. If you need to stop at any point, simply say so. When the device activated, Sarah found herself experiencing sensations unlike anything she had ever felt before. Her consciousness seemed to expand beyond the boundaries of her physical body. She could perceive the room around her from multiple angles simultaneously, as if she had developed dozens of additional senses. The sensation was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. For a moment, Sarah felt as though she was losing her individual identity and becoming something larger and more complex. Then, the feeling intensified, and she began to panic as she lost track of where her body ended and the external world began. But instead of asking to stop the simulation, Sarah forced herself to relax and embrace the experience. She focused on maintaining her sense of self while allowing her consciousness to expand and adapt to the new sensory input. Gradually, she began to understand and control the strange new perspectives the device was providing. When the simulation ended, Dr. Webb was studying his monitoring equipment with obvious interest. "Remarkable," he murmured. "Most candidates experience severe disorientation and request termination within the first few minutes. You not only completed the full simulation, but actually seemed to adapt to the sensory input." Sarah removed the device, feeling slightly dizzy but exhilarated. "It was unlike anything I've ever experienced, but I found it fascinating rather than frightening." Dr. Webb made extensive notes before looking up at her with what might have been approval. "Captain Chun, I'll be submitting my evaluation to Colonel Hawkins within the next 48 hours. Assuming my recommendations are accepted, you'll proceed to the next phase of the selection process." 2 days later, Sarah received another summons to Colonel Hawkins' office. This time, the colonel was smiling when she arrived. "Congratulations, Captain. Dr. Webb was extremely impressed with your performance. He believes you have the psychological profile necessary to succeed in the program." Sarah felt a surge of excitement, but she knew the real challenges lay ahead. The psychological evaluation was only the first hurdle in a process that would ultimately determine whether she could master the most advanced aircraft ever created. The second phase of the selection process began 1 week later in a facility that Sarah had never seen before. Located in an underground complex beneath the main base, the Medical and Research Center was a maze of sterile corridors lined with laboratories, testing chambers, and monitoring stations. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the chief medical officer for Project Shadowbird, met Sarah at the entrance to the facility. Dr. Vasquez was a neurosurgeon and biomedical engineer who had spent the last 5 years studying the effects of neural interface technology on human physiology. "Captain Chun," she said, extending her hand in greeting. "Welcome to the most advanced human performance laboratory in the world. Over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be putting your body and mind through tests that will determine whether you're capable of safely interfacing with the Ghosthawk systems." The first series of tests focused on Sarah's basic physical condition. She underwent comprehensive medical examinations that measured everything from her cardiovascular fitness to the electrical activity in her brain. The doctors drew what seemed like gallons of blood for genetic analysis and hormonal studies. The Ghosthawk's neural interface creates a direct connection between the pilot's nervous system and the aircraft's computer systems, Dr. Vasquez explained as she reviewed Sarah's test results. This connection allows for response times that are literally faster than human thought, but it also places enormous stress on the pilot's neurological and cardiovascular systems. The most intensive testing involved the neural compatibility assessments. Sarah was connected to machines that mapped the electrical patterns in her brain while she performed various cognitive tasks. The doctors were looking for specific neurological characteristics that would allow her to interface safely with the Ghosthawk systems. Not everyone's brain is capable of handling the dual consciousness experience, Dr. Vasquez said as she prepared Sarah for the most advanced neural scanning procedure. The interface essentially creates a hybrid entity where the pilot's mind merges temporarily with the aircraft's artificial intelligence. People with certain neurological patterns experience severe cognitive dissonance when this merging occurs. The neural scanning itself was an intense experience. Sarah lay motionless in a chamber surrounded by sophisticated monitoring equipment while powerful magnetic fields mapped the structure and activity patterns of her brain. The procedure took over 4 hours and left her feeling mentally exhausted. But the real challenge came during the interface simulation tests. Dr. Vasquez had developed a prototype system that could mimic some of the sensory experiences of connecting with the Ghosthawk without the risks associated with actual neural interface. The simulation chamber looked like something from a science fiction movie. Sarah was placed in a chair surrounded by monitors, sensors, and projectors that could create immersive virtual environments. Electrodes attached to her scalp and spine monitored her neurological responses, while the system fed artificial sensory data directly into her nervous system. The first simulation will be relatively mild, Dr. Vasquez said as she activated the system. You'll experience enhanced situational awareness similar to what the Ghosthawk provides during flight. Try to maintain your sense of individual identity while allowing your consciousness to expand. When the simulation began, Sarah found herself perceiving the testing chamber from multiple perspectives simultaneously. She could see herself sitting in the chair, but she could also observe the room from dozens of other vantage points as if she had developed eyes throughout the space. The experience was disorienting at first, but Sarah remembered her success with Dr. Webb's psychological testing and forced herself to embrace the expanded awareness rather than resist it. Gradually, she learned to process the multiple streams of sensory information without becoming overwhelmed. Excellent adaptation, Dr. Vasquez murmured as she monitored Sarah's neurological responses. Your brain is integrating the artificial sensory input with remarkable efficiency. The simulations became progressively more complex over the following days. Sarah experienced virtual flight scenarios where she controlled aircraft using thought alone. Her consciousness expanded to encompass the entire vehicle. She learned to process radar information, navigation data, and weapons system status as if they were natural extensions of her own senses. The most challenging simulation involved multitasking at a level that pushed the boundaries of human cognitive capability. Sarah found herself simultaneously piloting a virtual aircraft, analyzing threats from multiple directions, communicating with ground control, and monitoring dozens of system parameters in real time. This simulation approximates the cognitive load you would experience during actual combat operations with the Ghosthawk, Dr. Vasquez explained. The neural interface allows pilots to process information at superhuman rates, but the mental strain can be overwhelming. Sarah's performance in the simulations exceeded all expectations. Not only did she adapt quickly to the enhanced cognitive capabilities, but she actually seemed to thrive under the increased mental load. Her reaction times improved dramatically, and her ability to process complex information streams far surpassed anything the researchers had seen before. Captain Chin's neurological profile is remarkable, Dr. Vasquez told Colonel Hawkins during a progress review meeting. Her brain shows an unusual degree of plasticity that allows her to adapt to artificial neural input with minimal stress. Most candidates experience significant cognitive strain during these simulations, but she actually seems to find them easier than normal flying. The final phase of medical testing involved extended exposure to the interface simulation. Sarah spent 8 hours per day for 3 consecutive days connected to the system, experiencing prolonged periods of enhanced consciousness while the doctors monitored her for signs of neurological fatigue or damage. During these extended sessions, Sarah began to understand the true potential of the neural interface technology. Her awareness expanded far beyond normal human limitations, allowing her to perceive and process information at levels that seemed almost supernatural. She could track dozens of objects moving through three-dimensional space while simultaneously performing complex calculations and maintaining multiple communication channels. But, perhaps most remarkably, she retained her sense of individual identity throughout the process. While other test candidates had reported feeling like they were losing themselves in the expanded consciousness, Sarah maintained a clear distinction between her own thoughts and the artificial sensory input. The key is not to resist the expansion, she explained to Dr. Vasquez during a debriefing session. When you fight against it, you create internal conflict that disrupts the integration process. But if you embrace the enhanced capabilities while maintaining your core identity, the system becomes a natural extension of your own consciousness. Dr. Vasquez was fascinated by Sarah's insights. Previous test pilots had succeeded through brute force tolerance of the neural interface, essentially enduring the cognitive strain until their systems adapted. But Sarah had discovered a more elegant approach that worked with the technology rather than against it. Your approach could revolutionize how we train pilots for neural interface systems, Dr. Vasquez said. Instead of focusing on stress tolerance, we should be teaching candidates how to maintain their sense of self while allowing their consciousness to expand. The medical testing concluded with a comprehensive evaluation of Sarah's overall readiness for actual flight testing. Dr. Vasquez reviewed thousands of data points collected during the 2-week assessment period, looking for any indication that Sarah might not be able to handle the real Ghosthawk interface. All indicators are positive, she told Colonel Hawkins during the final evaluation meeting. Captain Chen's neurological compatibility with the interface systems is exceptional. Her stress response patterns are well within acceptable parameters, and her cognitive adaptation capabilities far exceed our minimum requirements. But Dr. Vasquez also expressed some concerns about the unprecedented nature of Sarah's test results. Her performance has been so remarkable that we're entering uncharted territory. We have no data on how someone with her level of neural interface compatibility might react to the full capabilities of the Ghosthawk system. Colonel Hawkins considered this information carefully. Are you recommending that we proceed with flight testing? Yes, but with additional monitoring and safety protocols. Captain Chun represents the most promising candidate we've ever evaluated, but the Ghosthawk's full capabilities are still largely unknown. We'll need to proceed very carefully during the initial flight tests. 3 days later, Sarah received notification that she had passed the medical evaluation and was cleared to proceed to the final phase of the selection process. She would begin flight training with the Ghosthawk within 1 week. As she prepared for this ultimate challenge, Sarah reflected on how far she had come from the night she first glimpsed the mysterious aircraft in its hangar. The journey had tested her in ways she never could have imagined, pushing her to the very limits of human capability and beyond. Meanwhile, word began to spread quietly through certain circles at Nellis that something significant was happening in the classified programs. The pilots who had laughed at Sarah's interest in advanced aircraft technology started to notice her extended absences from normal duty assignments. Some began to suspect that she was involved in something far more serious than routine training exercises. Major Rodriguez, who had been particularly dismissive of Sarah's futuristic fantasies, cornered Lieutenant Thompson after a briefing one afternoon. "Have you seen Chen around lately? She's been missing from the pilot's lounge for weeks." Thompson shrugged. "Maybe she finally got tired of us making fun of her science fiction ideas. Or maybe she requested a transfer to get away from us." But Rodriguez wasn't satisfied with this explanation. He had been in the military long enough to recognize the signs when someone was involved in a classified program. Sarah's sudden disappearance from normal base activities, combined with her previous interest in experimental aircraft, suggested that she might have been selected for something significant. The possibility that Sarah's fantasies about advanced aircraft technology might have been based on real knowledge began to gnaw at Rodriguez. Had he and the other pilots been wrong to dismiss her interests so casually? Was it possible that she had somehow gained access to information about classified programs that exceeded their security clearances? These concerns would prove to be well-founded. Sarah Chun was about to embark on a journey that would validate everything she had theorized about the future of aviation technology. The Ghosthawk was waiting, and soon the entire world would understand that some dreams are destined to become reality. But first, Sarah would need to prove that she could master an aircraft that represented the absolute pinnacle of human technological achievement. The neural interface that had fascinated her in simulations would soon become a permanent part of her consciousness, forever changing her understanding of what it meant to be both human and machine. The final test awaited, and, with it, the transformation of Captain Sarah Chun from an ordinary pilot into something extraordinary. The morning of Sarah's first encounter with the Ghosthawk arrived crisp and clear, with the Nevada sun casting long shadows across the runway. She had spent the previous evening in final preparation sessions with Dr. Vasquez and the flight test team, reviewing safety protocols and emergency procedures that would hopefully never be needed. As Sarah walked toward the restricted hangar, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation that reminded her of her first solo flight years earlier. But this was different. Today, she would be connecting her consciousness directly to the most advanced aircraft ever created, entering into a partnership between human and machine that few people could even comprehend. The hangar doors opened to reveal the Ghosthawk in all its mysterious glory. Up close, the aircraft was even more impressive than Sarah had remembered from her unauthorized glimpse months earlier. The smooth, dark surface seemed to absorb light and sound, creating an aura of otherworldly sophistication. The aircraft appeared to be waiting for her, its systems dormant but somehow aware. Colonel Hawkins was present for this historic moment, along with Dr. Vasquez, the chief test engineer, and a small team of technicians who would monitor every aspect of the flight. The atmosphere in the hangar was tense with anticipation and concern. Everyone understood that they were about to witness either a breakthrough or a potential disaster. Captain Chun, Colonel Hawkins said formally, "You are about to become only the fourth person ever to fly the YF-117X Ghosthawk. The aircraft you see before you represents decades of research and development and billions of dollars in advanced technology. More importantly, it represents the future of military aviation." Sarah approached the aircraft slowly, taking in every detail of its construction. The cockpit was unlike anything she had ever seen, with controls that seemed to respond to her proximity even before she touched them. The pilot's seat was surrounded by sensors and interface points that would connect directly to her nervous system. The pre-flight connection process is critical, Dr. Vasquez explained as she helped Sarah into the specialized flight suit. The suit contains fiber optic cables and neural sensors that will link your nervous system to the aircraft's computer systems. The initial connection can be overwhelming, so try to remain calm and allow the integration to occur gradually. As Sarah settled into the cockpit, she felt the neural interface cables connecting to ports in her flight suit. The sensation was strange but not unpleasant, like wearing clothing that was somehow alive and responsive to her thoughts. The aircraft's systems began to wake up around her, displays flickering to life and showing streams of data that she could somehow understand intuitively. "Beginning neural interface initialization," announced the chief test engineer from the control room. "All monitoring systems are active. Captain Chin, please report your status." Sarah's awareness began to expand as the interface systems came online. She could feel her consciousness merging with the aircraft's artificial intelligence, creating a hybrid entity that was both more and less than human. Her sense of individual identity remained intact, but it was now encompassed within a larger awareness that included every system and sensor on the aircraft. "Interface connection established," Sarah reported, her voice steady despite the extraordinary sensations she was experiencing. "All systems show green. I'm ready for engine start." The Ghosthawk's propulsion system was unlike anything Sarah had encountered before. Instead of the familiar roar of jet engines, the aircraft began to hum with a sound that seemed to resonate through her bones. The electromagnetic field generators that supplemented the traditional engines created a sensation of weightlessness even while the aircraft remained on the ground. "Engine parameters nominal," Sarah reported as her expanded awareness processed data from dozens of sensors throughout the aircraft. "Requesting permission to taxi." The first few minutes of ground movement were a revelation. Sarah's consciousness had merged so completely with the aircraft that she could feel the texture of the runway through the landing gear, sense the air pressure variations around the fuselage, and detect electromagnetic signatures from other aircraft on the base. The Ghosthawk had become an extension of her own body, responding to her thoughts faster than she could consciously process them. Tower, Ghost 1 requesting permission for takeoff, Sarah transmitted, using the aircraft's operational call sign for the first time. Ghost 1 cleared for takeoff. Good hunting, Captain. As Sarah advanced the throttles, the Ghosthawk leaped forward with acceleration that pressed her back into the seat despite the aircraft's inertial dampening systems. The runway rushed beneath them, and then they were airborne, climbing at an angle that would have been impossible in any conventional aircraft. The moment of takeoff was transcendent. Sarah's consciousness expanded to encompass the sky itself, her awareness reaching out through the aircraft's sensors to detect everything within a 50-mile radius. She could sense other aircraft moving through the airspace, track the locations of ground vehicles on the base below, and even detect the subtle electromagnetic emissions from electronic devices in nearby buildings. Ghost 1 airborne and climbing, Sarah reported, though the words seemed inadequate to describe the experience of flight in the Ghosthawk. All systems nominal. Requesting permission to proceed to test range alpha. Colonel Hawkins watched from the control room as Sarah guided the Ghosthawk through a series of basic maneuvers. The aircraft moved with fluid grace that defied conventional understanding of aerodynamics, performing turns and climbs that no other aircraft could achieve. The neural interface allowed Sarah to anticipate and compensate for air pressure changes, wind shear, and gravitational effects before they could affect the aircraft's performance. Her integration with the aircraft is remarkable, Dr. Vasquez observed as she monitored Sarah's neurological responses. The stress indicators we saw with previous test pilots are completely absent. She's not fighting the system, she's becoming part of it. The test flight proceeded through a carefully planned series of evaluations designed to assess both the aircraft's capabilities and Sarah's ability to control them. She performed high-speed maneuvers that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible in aviation, including vertical climbs, instantaneous direction changes, and sustained flight at angles of attack that should have caused any normal aircraft to stall. But the most impressive demonstration came when Sarah activated the Ghosthawk's full stealth capabilities. The aircraft seemed to vanish from existence, becoming invisible not just to radar, but to all forms of detection. From the ground, observers could see nothing but empty sky where the aircraft had been moments before. Ghost 1 requesting permission to demonstrate the adaptive camouflage system, Sarah transmitted, her voice carrying an undertone of excitement that she couldn't quite suppress. Permission granted. Proceed with caution. Sarah's expanded awareness reached out to analyze the visual spectrum around the aircraft, and then the Ghosthawk's surface began to change. The dark material shifted and flowed, matching the color and texture of the sky so perfectly that the aircraft became virtually invisible even to direct visual observation. From her unique perspective within the neural interface, Sarah could perceive the aircraft's camouflage systems working to match electromagnetic wavelengths, thermal signatures, and even the subtle patterns of light and shadow that the human eye used to detect objects in flight. The Ghosthawk had become a chameleon, adapting its appearance to blend seamlessly with its environment. Visual stealth engaged, Sarah reported. Aircraft is invisible across all detection spectrums. The implications of what she was experiencing began to sink in. The Ghosthawk represented a quantum leap in military technology that would fundamentally change the nature of aerial warfare. An aircraft that could become completely invisible while performing maneuvers that exceeded the capabilities of any existing fighter would be virtually invincible in combat. But Sarah also understood the profound personal cost of this technology. The neural interface that gave her such incredible capabilities was also changing her in ways that might be permanent. She could feel her consciousness expanding beyond normal human limitations, and she wondered whether she would ever be able to return to the confined awareness of an ordinary person. As the test flight continued, Sarah pushed the Ghosthawk through increasingly complex maneuvers. She performed aerial acrobatics that would have been impossible in any other aircraft, the neural interface allowing her to maintain perfect control even during the most extreme flight conditions. Ghost 1 demonstrating combat maneuvers, Sarah announced as she began a series of simulated attack runs against hypothetical targets. The aircraft responded to her thoughts with precision that exceeded human reflexes, acquiring targets and calculating attack solutions faster than conventional pilots could even perceive threats. From the control room, the test team watched in amazement as Sarah demonstrated capabilities that redefined their understanding of what was possible in aviation. The Ghosthawk moved through the sky like a living creature, fluid and graceful despite its incredible speed and power. She's not just flying the aircraft, the chief test engineer observed. She's become the aircraft. The neural integration is more complete than anything we achieved with previous test pilots. After 2 hours of flight testing, Sarah began the approach for landing. Even this routine procedure became an exhibition of the Ghosthawk's extraordinary capabilities. The aircraft could land vertically like a helicopter, horizontally like a conventional plane, or at any angle in between. Sarah chose to demonstrate the aircraft's ability to land on an impossibly short runway, bringing the Ghosthawk to a stop in less than 200 feet. As the aircraft powered down, Sarah felt her expanded consciousness gradually contracting back to normal human awareness. The transition was disorienting, like suddenly losing senses she hadn't known she possessed. The world seemed smaller and more limited than it had moments before. Post-flight status report, Dr. Vasquez requested as Sarah remained in the cockpit while the neural interface systems shut down. All systems performed flawlessly, Sarah replied, her voice carrying a note of wonder. The aircraft exceeded every specification and capability estimate. The neural integration was seamless, and I experienced no adverse effects from the interface. But even as she spoke these words, Sarah knew they weren't entirely accurate. The neural interface had changed her in ways that she was only beginning to understand. She could still feel echoes of the expanded awareness, phantom sensations from sensors that were no longer connected to her nervous system. Colonel Hawkins approached the aircraft as Sarah climbed out of the cockpit. "Congratulations, Captain. You've just made history. Your performance today exceeded our most optimistic projections." As word of the successful test flight spread through the restricted channels of the Ghosthawk project, Major Rodriguez and the other pilots who had laughed at Sarah's interest began to realize the magnitude of their error. Reports filtered back through unofficial networks that Captain Chun had been selected for the most classified program in the Air Force. "Did you hear about Chun?" Lieutenant Thompson asked Rodriguez quietly during a break between training exercises. "Rumor has it she's been flying some kind of experimental aircraft that makes our F-16s look like museum pieces." Rodriguez felt a growing sense of unease as he remembered his dismissive comments about Sarah's futuristic fantasies. Had she somehow known about the existence of advanced aircraft technology that was beyond their security clearances? Had his mockery driven away someone who could have shared valuable insights about the future of military aviation? The truth was even more remarkable than the rumors suggested. Sarah Chun had not just been selected to fly an experimental aircraft. She had become the first person to achieve complete neural integration with the most advanced military technology ever created. The Ghosthawk had chosen her as surely as she had chosen it, recognizing in her the unique combination of skills and psychological flexibility necessary to master its revolutionary capabilities. As Sarah submitted her post-flight report and prepared for debriefing sessions that would continue for days, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The laughter and dismissal of her fellow pilots seemed like ancient history now. She had proven that some dreams are not just fantasies, but glimpses of an extraordinary future. The Ghosthawk project would continue, with Sarah as its primary test pilot. Together, they would explore the boundaries of what was possible when human consciousness merged with advanced technology. The implications for military aviation and for humanity itself were profound and far-reaching. In the classified halls of the Pentagon, senior military officials were already discussing the strategic advantages that the Ghosthawk would provide. But none of them fully understood that they possessed something even more valuable than an invisible aircraft. They had found a pilot who could transcend the limitations of human capability while retaining her essential humanity. Sarah Chun had become something new, not quite human, not quite machine, but a hybrid entity that represented the next step in the evolution of military aviation. The commander, who would eventually say she took the Ghosthawk, understood that Sarah had not simply flown an aircraft. She had merged with it, becoming part of a partnership that would redefine the future of warfare and the possibilities of human achievement. The laughter had stopped. Now, there was only wonder at what had been accomplished and anticipation of what might come next.